The tapered sliding dovetail is a mechanical joint that has tremendous strength and beauty. In this video, I will demonstrate how to lay out and cut this joinery as I build a 7-foot tall white ash bookshelf. If you have a project that requires a tapered sliding dovetail, this video is for you. What is a sliding dovetail? Basically, what that is it's a wedge. The dovetail will act as a wedge, and it will go into a slot that is wider at one end and narrow at another. As it slides into that slot, it will become tight. The taper is very gradual, only about 50 thousandths over a 12-inch length. Closing the joint down to about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch with strong pressure allows for a snug joint when clamps are allowed to pull it the rest of the way closed. Here is a demonstration of how strong this joint can be. I am 220 pounds, and there we go. That's crazy. To understand the strength of the joint, I took one example to failure. This is a 2-inch section of white ash. The dovetail is undamaged. In order for the joint to fail, a large portion of the shelf had to self-destruct. It took about 100 pounds to break this. To make this joint, I used 2 router bits. The smaller one was in a handheld router, the larger one in a router table. A side rabbet plane, this one made by Veritas. An auxiliary fence made at the same angle as the dovetail bit. Setup blocks, and a router guide. I started this project by mounting a vise to a 36-inch long ash board and using my drill press with a carbide burr bit to mill a 14-degree fence for my Veritas side rabbet plane. The finished product worked very well. There you go. With the ability to fine-tune the shelf dovetail, I next worked on producing consistent tapered dovetail slots. And I have 2 routers that take the same base, but I don't have 2 of the same bases. I ordered another matching base, which should fit exactly in here, and now I'll be all set where I don't have to swap settings or bases between them. I played around with the new base and I'm just not happy. So I packed it up, gonna send it back. I did have some ultra high molecular weight polyethylene laying around. I made a base out of that, made it flat on 2 sides, put a rounded a radius on one side. That fits nice and tight, as you can see, no wiggle at all. The polyethylene makes it slide nice because it's self-lubricating. And I'm going to use this one instead. Much more precise. Before filming this video of the 7-foot shelf, I completed 2 smaller 4-foot shelves. This allowed me to fine-tune the process and take note of a few tips and tricks. You can see the 2 4-foot shelves in the background as I cut material for the 7-footer at the table saw. So there you go. The table saw had to be bumped out a little bit, turned sideways to accommodate the 7.5-foot boards. Normally 5 foot, not a problem. The next challenge is over here. Let me show you that. At the planer, you can see I have a router table set up. That's because I only have about 4.5 feet that I can accommodate as it is normally. In Upper Michigan, where I live, we finally start to get some sunlight in February. As a result, snow starts to curl off metal roofs. So satisfying. I have to decide how to glue up each side. And something that I've done for a while now is to match up the grain. When gluing up a side, I generally only like to have one board with cathedrals. A cathedral is, think about a topographic map, it's like a high spot. So right here would be a cathedral, another one is over here. Because of the cathedrals, it kind of compresses into quarter sawn on the edge. Same with this. So it's rift sawn that compresses into quarter sawn. So if I match up the two quarter sawn, once that's glued together, this is gonna look like one solid board, not two boards glued together. Here is a quick look at one of the 4-foot shelves and that nice clean side. At the router table, I'm setting up to do what's called a glue joint. So this is my test piece. One side has been jointed, the other side is just off the table saw, and that's fine. The reason that's fine is because the fences are set to different levels. When you come across on the first fence, it will hit the other one. That's because the second fence here is stepped out a little bit, so there's a bit of a gap. What that means is I am cutting the glue joint and acting like a joiner. Any little irregularity left from the table saw is just not going to matter. Maybe? What's going on? Oh shoot, I don't know. It turns out there was dust in the switch, and I blew it out, and now it turns on. So there you go. Just from eyeballing it and doing this a bunch. There are some tools that just make life easier. Jessom router table guides are fantastic for long stock. They keep the material tight to the table and also tight to the fence, both of which are critical when cutting a three-dimensional glue joint profile. So there we go. Everything is put back now, and I have the finishing room all set for glue up. There are many ways to glue boards together. Using a glue joint like this solves several problems with exceptional grace. First, it provides perfect alignment. No surface calls needed. The next benefit involves geometry, but can be summed up as simply ensuring the faces of each board will be perfectly flat to one another. And lastly, it makes applying glue very quick and efficient. No need for a glue roller or brush. I usually wait about 45 minutes. I think right now it's been about 2 hours because I got busy with something else. But yeah, between about 30 minutes and 2 hours, the glue scrapes off real nice. Check it out. Well, that's a first. I've never accidentally glued paper into my joint before. And let's hear it for a finely tuned 20-inch planer with a helical cutter head. Oh yeah. With the shelf sides planed to thickness, a pass of the joiner, followed by a pass of the table saw, results in sides that are now to thickness and to width. Then each side is cut to length. Look at that nice dust collection. In your face, fancy 3D printed dust collection shrouds. So now I'm just going to measure out each shelf. For the next step, I'm going to get them perfectly matched on this front face and the bottom edge. Those will be my references. And now all I'm going to do is transfer this line on the face of these boards. Now again, this is the front edge of the shelf. And then, for good measure, I'm going to put an X where the shelf board is going to go, because I really don't want to screw that up. Now with the boards marked, I'm going to transfer that line just a little bit onto the inside of the board. And on this board as well. So simply matching up each line. There we go. And now the last thing I'll do is mark which way the taper is going to go on the dovetails. Essentially, this is just a parallel guide with a perpendicular reference fence. To make it more accurate, I made this setup block. And I've marked it that the bottom of the side needs to be this way. And then using a small F clamp, this will get locked in. And the way this is made, I'm just simply using some washer head bolts, and then I'm drilling and tapping so I can thread these in so it's super secure. There's a little tab here to keep that from falling down, so I just need one clamp to hold it on. It's very faint, but I have some pencil lines that line up with the shelf. So I know we'll use that line to line up for the initial cut. Now it's good and secure. The reference is nice and tight, so I'll be cutting perfectly parallel. The first cut will be done with a straight bit. This is a 1/4 inch bit. What this will do is make it easier for the dovetail bit. If you try to take too big of a cut with a router, it will chatter. You also risk bit breakage and just other horrible things. With that done, now I can make the first pass with the dovetail bit. So there we go. Okay, and that is the first straight cut. Now I'm going to do that to the whole side, and then I'll come back and cut the taper. All right, so now that this has been cut straight, we need to put a taper. So this whole thing has to taper like that. We'll take off our straight shim. So here's the taper one. I've marked everything because this is super easy to put the wrong way. So again, bottom of the shelf. So this is the orientation. Make sure it's snug. Okay, this is kind of the important part. I have a little mark on here saying offset. That gets bumped up to the line. This is my shim block. There is the dovetail notch there. This block is also a double check. This is how we reference, and once it slides to this end, now there's a gap right here. Using the same block, on this side, there is a ledge, but then when we get to the end here, there is no ledge. And the reason I use a block versus relying on a pencil line here is that a block is going to be more accurate. When you use a physical setup block, you're able to get to precision of about 1/2 of an inch. If you're using a pencil line, you can probably get within 5,000, maybe as bad as 10,000ths. So essentially, a block simply removes error. So setup blocks are fantastic. I'm clamping, fully supported on this side. This one is locked in place. I'm not putting a clamp on this side because there's an overhang, and that can kind of flex this board and throw things off. Whenever I clamp a surface, I want support on both sides. Something else to double check too is because a dovetail is a taper, if it raises up, it'll mess up your joint. If it's up too high or too low because of that taper, where if it was a straight bit, it wouldn't matter. So I always check with my fingers right here, rub them across and make sure there's no lips. If there is a lip, I want this to be the high part and this to be the low part. If this is ever high and this is low, it's going to screw it up. So right here, this feels fine. There's a little lip because this is a little bit higher. That's fine. Now I'm going to go straight to the dovetail bit. There's no need to run a straight bit. I'm not going to do this every time, but we can measure without crushing the wood fibers too much. 0.424, and at this end 0.369. So you can see there is a little bit of a taper, and that is all we need. One side is all done. Now to repeat it on the second side. That's the inside. This is the front. This is the outside. One more to go.
Since neither router has a vacuum attachment, it is important to remove the chips after each pass. This helps to ensure a smooth cut and space for chip ejection. With 14 of the 21 passes complete, I switch to the angled shim and make the final 7 passes. Because these are tapered slots and each shelf side is a mirror of the other, like a left and right hand, I'll take time to double check that the taper is in the correct orientation before making my cuts. When setting up the router table to cut the shelf board dovetail, I trade out the split fence for a single board fence. A 1/16 of an inch off can make a huge difference. I will need to move the fence multiple times, so to reduce the risk of error, I make pencil marks directly on the table to mark fence position. I'm also using an Incra jig, the original, to aid in repeatability.
So that shouldn't happen. So that's telling me that my joint is loose. This is getting too skinny. So I have to adjust my shim. We will use this guy and measure our current shim. So right now, 0.71. And this got to about here. So this is 0.39 on the dot, and it goes down to 0.38. So 10 thousandths is the difference. This needs to be 10 thousandths skinnier. Here's me trusting in math. Well, I do trust in math, but I'm a 64th shallow right now because I can always take another pass. And now we'll do an unrehearsed test fit. So it should be, yeah, that's what should happen. Now, our angle should be good because it's tight there. It's snug there. So we have the right angle. Let's go take that other cut now, get a little deeper. The way I've set up this taper, I need to get to right there. So that has to get to here, and then the remaining can be pulled shut during glue up. But I gotta get 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch by hand, and then I can pull the rest with some glue on assembly. This is interesting. Something to remember about the router table is that the fence will make stuff straight. So it will cut a straight line even if the board is not straight. In this case, on this side, there is a bit of a dish in this board. But when I check this edge, it's perfectly straight. That means there is a thick spot right here. In order to get at this spot, I need to use a hand tool. This is a side rabbet. This is from Veritas or Lee Valley. And because it's shorter than the length of the shelf board, it can actually get into this concave portion. So we'll try that for a few passes here. And you can kind of hear, after a while, it can't cut anymore. That's as far as it can get into that scoop. Now we can recheck the fit. And you can already see it went further just by working on that portion. I don't think I can get it any further without violence. This works really well because it gets my hammer past this edge, so I don't have to worry about smashing that edge. It also locks it in there so I'm not gonna hurt my edges. So yeah, this test block is the perfect beater block. Is at 7/8, so that is within tolerance. I can pull that the rest of the way closed with clamps. This is a look at all the dovetails that have been fit so far to one side. And something I've done is I've labeled each one so I know what is the top and what is the front. Over on the bench, I now have the second side fitted. And I've labeled very clearly what shelf goes where. All of these just came off the router table, and what's interesting to see is how each one fits differently. 2 1/4, about 1 1/4 inch. That one's good, that's under 1/4 inch. Around 2 inches. 1 inch, oh, 2 1/4, and right around 2 inches. That really shows the importance of fitting things by hand. Trying to mess around at the table, it would be too easy to take too much. Something that is pretty much inevitable is tear out. Right here, right here. On the shelf sides, there's also some tear out.
At the joiner, I have it set to take 2 1/16 inch cuts before the shelf board is to the planned 12 inches wide. Depending on the tear out, I can take a pass on each side or 2 on the same side.
Nice and crisp. Yeah, cut your parts oversize and don't worry about tear out. Now for sanding, I'm going to start with 120, move to 180, 320, and then finally, just to get rid of those fine scratch patterns, I'm going to go to either 400 or 600. I'll play that by ear. I have it set up here with the workbench. This is Homasote. It's just a soft sound deadening material used in building construction. Works great as a sanding, just to set something on it so it doesn't get scratched. And I have 3 LED tubes acting as a strong raking light. The raking light really shows everything. I'm starting with 120 grit. This is the workhorse grit, and I press down hard and generally don't pay much attention to how fast or slow I'm waving the sander around. Each grit higher, however, gets handled with finesse and light pressure. It's also a good habit to brush off the board between grits. Once I reach 320 grit, the paper needs to cut fast or it gets tossed. The higher grits need to cut fast with little pressure to get that swirl-free look. A final pass with 400 or 600 grit will reveal any missed curlicues from errant grit or poor technique. When the grain comes closer here, when it's rift sawn or quarter sawn, sanding with 320 is fine. You won't see any lines or swirls at all. But when you get to this really wide part, you'll always see swirls unless you go up to really high grit, which is really hard to sand consistently, or hand sand. When I see this, go with 320. And that just gets rid of all the swirls in those spots. So I'm really just targeting these spots when the grain opens up real wide. Again, quarter sawn, you'll never see the swirls. They just don't seem to show up at all. I'm going to use hide glue for the assembly. That allows me a good working time. It's also slippery and it will not swell the wood. That's very critical for a tight fitting joint to come together without getting stuck.
Everyone should have at least one large glue up go smoothly in their life. This was mine. Because this is a mechanical joint locked in place with glue, there is no need to use clamps. And no clamps means no need to watch the clock. Each shelf board is its own glue operation, and once it's in place, that's it. Each joint also pulls the shelf more and more into square. I left each shelf about 1/16 to 3/32 wider than the sides. The excess will be planed flush on the back of the shelf.
That glue up went phenomenal. I've never had a glue up go that good before. All comes down to the sliding dovetail. As you tighten it in, it locks the joint together. I can just do one shelf at a time and not worry about the clock. Super cool, way better than trying to do a dado and screws, even though it takes a lot longer to cut the joint. Assembly is a breeze. That joint looks perfect, and they all look like that. I've spread glue on just the 1/2 inch closest to the edge here. And now I'm going to try to kind of roll it back and squeeze the glue out just to one side. Look close and you'll see I'm white knuckling that hand plane. It is a Veritas custom smoothing plane, and if I were to drop it, it would land full force on the concrete below. When I move to the sander, I don't seem to be as nervous about dropping it. Strange, since it costs more than the hand plane. Perhaps I just get nervous around pretty things. This is one of my favorite time savers. It's a cordless trim router, and I am using a 1/16 inch white side roundover bit, and I'm going to zip through 85 linear feet of sharp edges on this side alone. And now I'm using a DeWalt. Pretty sure I just threw that across the shop after I was done. Just going to touch it up with some 320, hit any of those little nooks and crannies, make sure the bearing didn't leave any marks on the wood. Nailed it. So hand planing keeps the wood nice and bright, doesn't make dust, but when you make dust, it clogs the pores, and that can affect the look of the finish. This is just an extra step that I like to do. See if I can show it on camera. Air quality sure took a hit. The finish is 3 applications of Birchwood Casey True Oil. I'm applying it with a large foam applicator. Buy them from a home center or in bulk from a woodworking store and not the dollar store. Once 5 to 10 minutes has passed, I return with a lint-free rag and wipe away the excess. This is an efficient way to build up a drip-free finish. One coat of True Oil has been applied, and now it is the next day. And it's real, there we go. It's got a real nice soft look to it. It's still really smooth. And man, those joints look so good. The second application is applied the same as the first. No sanding between these 2 applications is required. Because it is after work, I am still wearing dress socks.
I'm also representing my high school track team. Go Cougars! Instead of repositioning the shelf to apply finish to the back, I found that an automotive creeper worked well.
Coat number 2 is all done. Let's go outside. Nope. Yep. The second coat is dried, and you can see it has a little bit more shine to it. The second coat has given it a little bit of a sheen. It still has a nice soft look to it, but now it's starting to tend towards semi-gloss. The entire shelf has been prepped with Scotch-Brite pads. I used it to knock all of the nibs off, so now it feels silky smooth to the touch. Once that was done, I used a microfiber cloth to collect as much dust as possible. So now I have a clean and smooth surface. Up to this point, I've been building up the finish to give it the correct sheen. For the final application, I'm going to take 19 parts True Oil, 1 part mineral spirits, and make a slightly thinner wiping varnish.
For the final application, I'm going to pad on a thin coat and then wipe it off within 3 to 5 minutes. This final application is simply filling the small scratches from the Scotch-Brite and providing a smooth and uniform finish. The goal is to maintain the sheen of the second application and provide a silky smooth feel.
Okay, now lift. Keep going. I'm an athlete. Gentle. And it'll go right through the garage door. Since the shelf is over 7 feet tall, it does carry with it the possibility of tipping over. I'm going to mount them so they're tight. Now the shelf is heavy. It will likely sink into the carpet a little bit with weight, so this is able to move down a little bit and still have plenty of purchase. If anything, it'll sink maybe 1/8 of an inch, at most 1/4. That's plenty of grip. This is white ash, so it will hold with tenacity. This will not break. The wall anchors are these great big stainless steel screws. So the wall bracket is there. This will go on the back of the shelf, and that gives a little bit of movement while keeping it secure. And now it's up to my wife to fill the 28 feet of shelving up with books. Thanks a lot for checking out the video, guys. Take care.
Wow, it's bigger than I imagined.